the body essentially is the subconscious mind in certain ways.
Good afternoon, good day, good evening. I don't know what time you're listening in or where you are listening from. It's your boy, your host, NaRon Tillman, and you are with me for another episode of Walk in Victory. Speaking of victory walks, I started out in ministry when I was 24 years old, and I'll be 50 years old next month. Or if you're listening, I'm already 50, so I lived half of a century, 75, baby. And I remember early on, I was, and I still am, an avid reader. I got this book called Emotional EQ. And that was my first introduction to the operation of the brain. I never looked at preaching early on, or ministry, or anything that we did about really shaping the subconscious mind. Although faith happens in the mind, I just never really was able to bridge those lenses and conversations. I started doing yoga in my 30s. I became a yoga instructor in my mid to late 30s and a mindfulness coach. And again, people would question, how can you do yoga and still preach and be a pastor? And because I knew that there was a harmony there, but I really didn't have the words to harmonize them. I just knew the health benefits of yoga. I understood the more I became flexible in my body, the more I became flexible in my mind. So those were like my talking points, but it was really because I didn't have a full lens of understanding. And I'm saying this to say, fast forward, when I took my meditation course through the Chopra Foundation, and we went through this portion where we did the I am, and we stripped away our surnames and our titles, and we just I am. Something shifted in me, because I would do the yoga, but I never really did the meditation. My worldview from the meditation part was something that subconsciously I didn't jive with. And after I did that, I started to really do some research into meditative practices and all of that other stuff. And I came into the knowledge of neuroscience. And like lightning to a tree, my internal being lit up. All of the things that I've experienced through entrepreneurship, through my early childhood, through ministry, through yoga, through all those things, now made sense and had a meaning. I became a better teacher. I became a better pastor. I became a better person to myself. Because I realized I wasn't my biggest mistake, nor am I my biggest accomplishment. I just am. And I wrote a book that shows the correlation between subconscious prompting, because that's what we do every day. With the news we watch, with the songs we listen to, we're prompting our subconscious. And how prompt engineering for AI agents are similar. And it's called Awakening I Am. And I'm going to keep talking about it, yes, because I want you to go out and purchase it. It'll be out this fall. But when you walk away from the book, I'm very vulnerable in the book. I use my own personal life lessons. I do draw from other figures, public figures, and stuff like that. But I draw from my own personal experiences because I don't want someone to struggle in humanity because they're afraid of their title. Most of my adult mistakes, and as an adult, we will all make mistakes, say things, hurt people. All of my adult mistakes happen after ministry. I thought that ministry was going to turn me into a perfect person. No, it turned me someone into a monster at some points in my life. But they were all from my personal experience, and so that I can have these conversations that we're about to have with Joshua. Joshua, sir, how are you?
I'm doing amazing, and NaRon, you just touched on so many important topics and so many areas of overlap that we have experienced. So I'm really excited to dive into these areas with you.
Well, let's go. Let's dive in. Tell the audience what you want them to know. I'm listening now. You got the floor.
Absolutely. So just going back to very early experiences, I'll share a couple of things that I think were relevant. So when I was about 5 years old, and my father, who was a professor at Northeastern University in Boston for about 55 years, he used to bring home a very eclectic group of friends. And one of them used to come into the basement next to the room where I lived at that time and do transcendental meditation. And at a very young age, I would watch this practice and I was just fascinated by it. I had no idea what he was really doing, but it seemed to captivate me and captivate my imagination. Fast forward about 20 years after that, and I've just finished college and I'm working at Club Med, the resort company. And I meet a gentleman by the name of Jack England. He was 73 years old at the time and more flexible than any baby that you've ever seen. He was the yoga instructor at the facility, and he also taught reflexology, meaning foot massage, and the study of the correspondence to the spots on your feet, on your hands, in your eyes, to the various organs and processes in the body. And what was so interesting about his ability to explore both of those areas very deeply was that he touched upon all of these things that seem to now be coming into the mainstream, right? Going back, 30 years ago, yoga instructors were still relatively rare at the time, and having one that could explain to you what was happening inside the body because they had studied all of these various reflexology points was fascinating because as I've dove deeper into these studies and as have you realize that the body essentially is the subconscious mind in certain ways. Right. So I hear you mention with yoga becoming more flexible. You said, as I became more flexible in my body, I also became more flexible in my mind. And it's so interesting how those things are linked and how when we learn through various lenses to interpret them, neuroscience being one of them, that it really opens up a fascinating area of exploration. So those kind of couple of things from what you said really touched me, NaRon. The other one, which I thought was fascinating, is this concept of I am, right? There doesn't have to be anything after that, right? Anything that we put after that statement is only limiting who we are. And I think so much of the process of growing up and of becoming wiser and learning and being out in the world is this evolution of taking things away to get back to I am, right? As young teenagers and young adults, we're trying to kind of prove ourselves to other people and show the world who we are. And we end up putting all of these other labels on us as if they're badges that show merit. And then at some point, we start reversing that process. And so I'm very excited to be here to have a conversation around these various things with you.
Well, let's dive into what neuroscience to me is doing. I was just on a podcast a couple of days ago with an atheist, and it was a very, very interesting podcast. Holds in my faith, and I don't have a problem with that. Some years ago, I probably couldn't have had that conversation. And, what neuroscience is doing now is really bridging the gap between science and spirituality. How has this evolution helped you in your teaching when you're working with people, or has it hindered you, or do you find it as how do you find it? I don't want to put any words in your mouth. How do you find that we're now neuroscience is saying, hey, there's a part of our subconscious mind that we can't explain.
Yeah. Earlier on in my life, I would say that neuroscience and call it scientific research in general, I found to be quite limiting in what I was exploring personally, and I'll
Mm,
tell you why. So when I first dove into this aspect of, and we'll dive deep, how can people connect very deeply with one another and ultimately to do so using only thought, which is one thing we'll dive into in this conversation. I was so curious to understand scientifically what enabled that because I was having the personal experience of being able to do that. And I was searching for the scientific explanation, the mechanism of action behind it. And so I went to many of the top universities I could get to. I went to Harvard and to MIT and the University of Pennsylvania and numerous places to talk to the researchers that were working in particularly neuroscience and in areas that I thought were relevant to what I was figuring out on my own. And what I found there was fear, tremendous fear to explore or research something that could be considered to be in what they would call the psychic realm. And it was really eye-opening because they were afraid to ruin their careers if they talked about it or if they researched it. And they couldn't get money in a direct research grant to study it until it became palatable to academia to do so. And that shift didn't happen probably until the 2010s or somewhere
mhm,
around that time period. So at the beginning part of this exploration for me, call it the 90s and early 2000s, I found this need for scientific validation to be quite restrictive because when we look at what neuroscience or what science is, it's an attempt to explain or recreate, right, certain conditions and certain qualities that we observe. It's not the ultimate arbiter to tell us something is true or not, but many people in society perceive it that way, right? So early on, I find fascinating conversations with people. And then as soon as it got into the realm of thought being the thing that was driving the results, it hit a brick wall in academia. So at that point in time, I call it, I was a little bit negative towards that community because I was just looking to explain it. And I was searching for the scientific answer, and what I was met with was kind of fear and an inability to do so. If we look just my own personal experience, a little bit after 2010, a few researchers started to kind of crack open that door inside of academia. And nowadays, it's very widely being studied, right? So we have thousands and thousands of studies in these areas of meditation and mindfulness in the area in which I focus, which is known as interpersonal synchrony. And to the point where I had gone back to business school in the 27 to 29 timeframe, and in 2015-16, the school I'd gone to, Wharton, opened up a neuroscience initiative, which was a combination of the business school, the School of Arts and Sciences, and other programs within the university. And so nowadays, you can go anywhere and talk about neuroscience and spirituality and the intersection of those two things. And the more we have these conversations, the more I'm realizing we're essentially just trying to say, explain, or show the same exact things, but to do it in the language that different audiences understand and accept as true. And so we're at a point now in society, which is amazing, right? Because we have this growing number of people that are interested in, let's say, diving internal through meditation, through yoga, through other types of internal and spiritual work. And you have this growing research body that's coming at it from at first, physics standpoint, now more of a quantum
Mm-hmm.
physics
Mm-hmm.
standpoint. And we're kind of, so as we bring these two worlds together, now we have a fluency whereby we can both experience things personally to know that they're true, and also have the language and ultimately the research to talk about it academically. And so we're in a very interesting time for people interested in exploring these kinds of fields. And I find with my friends who are more steeped on the research side, those tend to be some of the most spiritual and spiritually curious people,
Yeah.
because I think many of them have seen the limitations of trying to make science the ultimate arbiter, because ultimately you're trying to answer hypotheses and continue to evolve understanding. And to many people, it feels like the scientific community has tried to kind of lock down understanding as if it's to say, this is how it is,
And that's it.
and we shouldn't push beyond, right?
So you developed a shift movement or monicum. Before we talk, I want you to talk about what that means, what that is, the shift movement that you've developed and created. But I
Sure.
also want to explore how frustrating were you? How frustrated were you a little bit more deeply as you started to develop it? And do you think that that frustration helped you to become a better developer and one who explains both the spirit and the science with both limitations because you can see from both sides. The reason why I want to look at the frustration is because I'm sure that if you went to a religious setting, you would have been rejected. And now here it is in the academic setting, you're being rejected. But yet it didn't stop you. It helped you to actually craft some really groundbreaking material. So can you explain to the audience what the shift method is and how did the rejection that you personally experienced help you to develop all of the methods that you developed?
Absolutely. And I'll answer the second piece first about, call it, the frustration and the drivers there, because I think so many amazing things in life come out of the tremendous challenges that we face.
Mm.
Right? So for me, this was not an intellectual pursuit. For me, from the time I was in my mid-teens, I was almost completely shut down emotionally. I didn't want to show vulnerability. I didn't want to express what I was really going through. And so I had this part of me that was craving connection with other people, and this part of me that was deathly terrified of being vulnerable and doing that. And you see, those two things don't live so well together. So I was on this quest to figure out, how can I feel deeply connected to people, right? How can I do that without having to kind of crack open my heart and really show the world what was going on inside? And so it was that drive that was pushing me to have these conversations. So the frustration, honestly, it didn't really get to me because I was so determined to figure this out for myself. And I knew that if I could figure out for myself how to really connect deeply with people, I could then help a tremendous number of people through that same thing. So that's what drove me. So to tell people just broadly what we're talking about, like what I focus on now. So I focus on two things now. One is called the sync protocol, SYNC, and the other is called the shift code. So we've all had the experience of what we call getting in sync with someone, right? You just meet someone and you just click. You're on the same wavelength. Well, we've all had that experience and it feels amazing. But the challenge is it happens at random, right? You never know when you're going to experience that with a person. What I have done is I have figured out how to make that into a skill set so that any person can choose to create this synchrony to get in sync with anyone else on demand whenever they want to. So that's been the primary thing I've been focused on for years now. And the reason why that became so important and enabled me to push through the frustration is it turns out this getting in sync, what the scientists call interpersonal synchrony, it's actually the foundation of human connection. And what I mean by that is right now, as we are speaking here together, even though we're in different locations, our brains and our bodies are trying to connect up with one another. Like they're literally moving around trying to match each other. And if we were wearing, let's say, a headset that could measure our brainwave activity, we would actually see that our brainwaves start to connect and start to move in unison with one another. And it's that power, once connected, that drives all great interpersonal relationships. And you mentioned the book related to emotion that you read years ago. All decisions that we make in our life are driven by emotion, and then we use logic to justify why we made that decision, right? So the reason why you make any decision is because you want to, right? You feel like it. And then after that, you think, ooh, how am I going to explain that to my friends, to my spouse, to myself, to my colleagues, right? And so we use our logic then to justify it. So if you imagine now, if you have the ability to create connection and create this synchrony, what you're sharing through that connection is emotion. It's emotional state that gets shared through the synchrony connection. So what I've essentially figured out is how can people share emotional state? And therefore, how can people, what we would call in the world of spirituality, how can people co-create what they experience together through these emotional states? So that's the primary area in which I focus. And there are now 16,528 citations of research studies on this very topic. If you look in what's called the PubMed database, which is the National Institute of Health database. So there's a tremendous body of research exploring all of the benefits of synchrony, both for interpersonal relationships, for relationships between parents and kids, with teachers and students. It's basically been identified as the underpinning of social interaction. So that's one area that I put a tremendous amount of work into, and now basically teach people how to create this. It's actually a very quick process, just takes about 90 minutes, but it's transformative to people's lives. Now, the other aspect of that, what I call the shift code, is a similar process, but using language. So if you imagine that you connect up with someone very deeply on this emotional level, physiological, your bodies are linked together. If you can now layer in the right language so that you're now connected linguistically, you deepen that relationship and emotional connection. So, what the shift code means is that when you speak, you are going to primarily choose to speak in terms of what you see, what you hear, what you feel, or what you think. So the shift code means see, hear, feel, think. And if you can identify which of those four a person prefers to use, let's say if they prefer what they see, they might say, "Oh, that's very clear to me. I see what you mean," right? Could you just make that a little bit dimmer because it's a little bit too bright? They're focused on all of these visually oriented items. If you can identify that in a person and then use that type of language when you speak back to them,
Mm.
they feel like you get them. They're like, oh, yeah, that just makes sense. It hits me the right way. And so this shift code is a communication protocol that teaches people very quickly how to use language to create connection with people. And so when you take the sync protocol, which is about the bodies connecting and the brains connecting, and then you layer on top of that the language piece, you end up having just a very powerful capability to use in your personal life, in your professional life. And then there are ways through these two processes to dive back into more, call it individual pursuits. I always say to people, the quality of your life is the quality of your connection to yourself, to other people, and to source, however you define source,
Yeah.
right? And through these tools, a person can start to kind of remove some of those layers they've added on and get back to who they really are, that I am that you mentioned. So I'm very curious to you, like, how did you start that journey back towards that?
It was a course I was doing my certification through the Chopra Foundation, and we we started to do these I am meditations, and the meditation consisted of we would repetitiously say in our subconscious or silently with the eyes closed, I am first name, last name. So it would be I am NaRon Tillman, I am NaRon Tillman, I am NaRon Tillman. Then we remove the name, I am NaRon. And then we would move the first name and just was stuck with I am. And then Deepak, as he was doing the instruction, would say, don't put an adjective. See, most people, when we do our affirmations, we and they teach us affirmations, they say, I am happy, or I am overjoyed, or I am, and he said, don't put anything behind it, just be I am. And something shifted in me. I was going through a real rough period in my life. And I remember this morning, this meditation hit totally different. I began crying, letting go of some stuff that I've been holding on to. And at that moment, I wasn't a
Mm-hmm.
pastor, I wasn't a dad, I wasn't a husband, I wasn't a business person. I just was. And the fear of being just I am without any type of agitation or any type of label connected is no one wants to just be. And we were prompted to allow in the moment, and we were doing these meditations 3 times a day for 3 hours. I mean, 3 times a day, an hour meditation, 30 minutes to an hour, because it was part of our training. And every time when I did it, it became more and more powerful, more and more powerful. So, looking back, I used to always preach about Christ's I ams, Christ's true I am itself. I am the light of the world. I am the birth. But I never saw what the I am meant for me. And this was the first time that those two words meant more than any other word that I've ever experienced. Then when we get to the science behind the I am, how I am and the Amen are connected synthetically, semantically, and the hums, when we do a hum, like all of these things are phonetically connected, and what the repetition of these words does to the to the mind, to the brain wave, right? it disconnected me from a I want mentality. I grew up poor, so we grew up in a community where it's like, what do you want to be? And I am disconnecting me from I want. So I had a shift in my early 40s. I felt like a child again, relearning. There was a shift in my mentality from
Yeah.
I want to be a business guy. I want to be this. I want to be a good husband. I want to be to I am, and I am is not a falsehood. It's not a false narrative, especially when we're honest. Because if we do the I am meditations, and that's why the book Awakening I Am is to me was an important work, because if I can get a person to spark into not who you think you are, but who you really are, then this what you're talking
Right.
about, the shift and the synchronicity always happens. What happens when we're trying to model ourselves after someone else's label is we now have to always perform. But
Yeah, 100%.
yeah,
Yep.
tapping into our true I am itself makes having conversations synchronized. How many times have you had to see children or a married couple arguing? They're saying the same thing, but they're not synchronized, so they can't hear it. And that's why what you're doing with the shift method and the sync method, I had to have you on the show and have this conversation.
Yeah, no, let's dive deeper. Where would you like to take this conversation? We've got a lot of interesting places we can
Yeah,
go with this.
so now where we are, we talked about the past and where we are now in the future. Over the last 3.5 years, there has been a huge dynamic. I love the fact that you said 16,000, but not the 16,000 reports, but the 28 was was amazing to me, because like really up to date. Like there's 16,000 whatever 128 reports.
I literally checked it today.
So it wasn't the 16,000 that was impressive. It was the 28. But we see all of this work happening now. Are you excited, or do you feel like there's an oversaturation of conversation in the market?
Oh, I'm so excited, and I'll tell you why, NaRon. So this research, the vast majority of it to date, has been taking place, call it in the laboratory, right?
Mm.
It's these double-blind studies, very well controlled. And the primary reason for that is we didn't have the technology that was small enough, cheap enough, light enough to bring it into real daily life. But now we do. So right now we have, next generation AirPods will be able to measure brainwave activity, right? Your Apple Watch, your or the rings you wear, their hats that you wear, the VR, the AR systems, all of these systems and wearables are going to be able to measure our biometrics, right? Our brain, our heart, our breathing, our skin response. So we're about to have this explosion in the capability to monitor real-time biology and layer on top of that to see when we're in sync and when we're out of sync. So it's about to become a widely available tool for the masses where we will be able to see, let's say, through a colored light on our watch when you and I sync up, right? And so I'm incredibly excited to see what we can do with that, because you think about the applications that we can now have if this starts to become part of people's, call it, everyday understanding. And so, where I'm really hopeful is if you think about what the ultimate goal of getting in sync is, I believe it's really getting us each back to I am, and then showing us how there really is only one I am, right? If I paint a picture for people and I say, imagine we were all one fabric, right? And we were then, let's say, cut into various pieces, billions of different pieces. But we hold this understanding that we're actually the same piece. We just appear to be different from one another. Different colors, different sizes, different shapes. But ultimately, what synchrony shows us is that beneath all of these things we think may separate us, there's actually a technology to unite us.
Yeah.
And so I'm so excited to see where we can go with this because once people are aware that this synchrony exists, that you can create deep connection with anybody on a moment's notice, I'm very hopeful that two things will happen. Number one, we'll start to see past the perceived physical differences, right?
Yeah.
Gender, race, age, sex, culture, religion, like all of those things, we have the capability to go beneath that and make those go by the wayside and connect as humans to one another. So that's one piece that I think is extremely powerful and I'm optimistic about. The second piece is that from a physics standpoint,
Mm.
when you and I get in sync and our brain waves, for example, align, we add the power of those waves together. It doubles. And if you get more and more people, you can see an exponential growth in physical power. And so, what we're seeing is by getting people to unite and to sync with one another, we will be able to impact the literal fabric of what we call the physical world.
Wow.
Right? You mentioned very early in this conversation something very fascinating, which is programming, right? We are fed all day, every day, through video, through voice, through ads, all kinds of, for lack of a better description, all kinds of crap
Bullshit.
that just floods our mind
Yeah.
and makes us, right? And it makes us think we're less than. It makes us think we need to chase the labels that you talked about. But what if more and more people start to come to the belief in their own way that if we strip away these things that were programmed into us, maybe at its core, we're just a tremendously powerful
Mm.
group of people that can do things tremendous for humanity, for our people we love, for it. So I'm extremely hopeful that we're going to do that. And then the third, I would say, big piece of that is more and more people, thanks to podcasts that you're doing, thanks to research people are doing, thanks to things happening on social media, more and more people are getting interested in these
Yes.
topics,
Yes.
right? And they're not willing to just accept what they've been told. No, if something doesn't make sense, people want to dive in now. They want to find other like minded people, they want to learn. So I think we're in a really interesting time that's going to continue to kind of flourish
Yeah.
as more and more people get interested in these kinds of things.
I learned that the dogma, I grew up in a really dogmatic society, right? Where if a person was, this is who they grew up in, this is what we believe, they were really dogmatic about it. Now, people are really welcoming conversation and they're open to more. And I think that happened because we've seen the flaw of humanity, where we held certain people to a high esteem and we looked at them as persons that were, I'm just going to use this religious term, holy or reverent, right? And when the skirt comes off and we see that everybody has faults and fears and doubts and all these things, we had to really reshape that mindset from these people are here and everybody else is here, right? No, that's not the case. We're all humans trying to figure this thing called humanity out. Man is not just Homo sapien, but man is Homo religious. So there has to be an interconnection between who we are. AI cannot duplicate that. But what AI can do is help us to really measure how synchronized we can become. And when we all roll
Absolutely.
at the same time, forcing towards the same energy, there's nothing that we can't do as a society. So We have what we call in our brains, everyone who's listening, as we begin to close out, a negative bias. And the news, the headlines, all of those things are geared towards pricking and penetrating that negative bias so they can help us to formulate how we're going to move. And they can project through spiral dynamics, which is a whole nother form of psychosomatics, how we spend our money, how we communicate, and how we move society forward. I'm glad to have persons like you, Joshua, who is not bending to the norm and pounded the pavement so that you can show the world that we can be in sync and that we can also shift. You have one final thing that you needed to say to us. What should we be looking out for moving forward?
To wrap it up in one final message, but first, I hope this is the start of many conversations, so not a final message. But it is to look for the sameness in other people. One of the exercises that I have people do, and it's so powerful, it takes a very short period of time, but if you just take a half hour in your day when you're out in public and just imagine that everybody you see is you.
Hmm.
Like literally see if you can visualize that when you're out and imagine it's all you looking back at you, doing your things. Number one, you're going to find that you're going to treat people significantly better. And number two, as you dive down into the deeper, say, meaning behind that, you might someday realize that's actually true.
Wow. I'm gonna do that. You know, I would like to have you come back on after I do personally launch the book, and I'll send you a link copy because I want your input. Um, but
I would love to read it.
I want to go through. I want to actually sit the audience down and go, and we can take the full 90 minutes or however long you think that we need, and we have to break it up into parts. We can do that also. But I want to go through the shift method. I want to go through piece by piece so you can break down the both methods, and we can just focus our conversation around the development and around how people can implement it. But if you cannot wait for that to
Sounds right.
happen, yeah, I would like to do that. And if you cannot wait for that to happen, guess what? You don't have to wait for us to get back together. You can go into Joshua's website, and all of the information is in the bio. I mean, in the description. And I don't ask you for cash apps or Venmos or financial support for this community. I want to lead with value, and I want to have conversations with masters of their industry so that you can walk away like I feel a whole lot smarter today, right? And you can walk away feeling smarter. But I do ask that you support our guests, that you look at their offerings, that you write these things down, and that you apply them to your life. Not only that, I ask that you hit like and subscribe. Your likes, your subscriptions, and your comments mean the world to us. Like, subscribe, and comment. And finally, go to walkinvictory.me. By now that you're listening to this, the book may be out. Go and get a copy for you, get a copy for your enemy, and get a copy for someone that you love. But most of all, don't walk with your head down. Don't walk making excuses. We together walk in victory. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace. Thank you so much.